I can hear you now.
Okay, so we begin again.
We begin again. That's right.
He is Mark Davenport, and I am Heidi Hönlein. And
this is a special presentation of the Wisdom Factory, which is a conversation forum with people who have experience and knowledge and wisdom to share with the world.
Yeah, we are doing this Wisdom Factory for more than 2 years, and we had several series already. One is Wisdom Technologies, Conversations That Matter. Then we had Wisdom in Relationships, and ongoing series every 2 or 3 weeks we have Women Matters, and encounter only for women.
Yeah, I'm not in
Men
that
are
one,
excluded.
No. Though I overhear in the background.
And presently we are working on a new series under the banner of Masterminding Integral Aging, which is also the name of our Facebook group, and it has its own website, interaging.com. Mm-hmm. And today we are honored to kick off with a sort of a preview for this new series, which will start in November, with our highly qualified guest, Dr. Connie Corley, and the title is Conscious Aging. Hello, Connie.
Yes. Say hello, Connie.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Some words about.
Yeah, Dr. Corley is a frequent contributor to our Facebook. Hey, I've said this before. Our Facebook group. And she quickly volunteered to join us in this Google Plus video event when we first asked. Her academic credentials include a Master of Social Work, plus a master's and a doctorate from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. That, combined with her extensive publications and presentations about aging and the arts, geriatrics, rehabilitation, spirituality, and substance abuse, and also as an adjunct professor at Saybrook University, and certified by the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and there's more, but that's enough. She is an ideal partner for this conversation on conscious aging. And so, as we sort of forewarned you.
Yeah, maybe she wants to add something.
Oh.
Well, I've been teaching at Fielding Graduate University. It's an adult education focus, and I teach doctoral students and chair the Creative Longevity and Wisdom doctoral concept.
Oh.
And I'm an emeriti professor at California State University, Los Angeles.
Okay. It's a long list. Yes, it is.
So who is better qualified to talk about this topic?
I'm honored. I'm really honored to be here today.
Well, thank you. And we are to, there was a cat.
A cat.
Yeah. and so now, as forewarned, can we ask, what got you so excited or involved about this topic of aging and all those associated activities?
Yes. Well, this is a very auspicious time to be talking about this because it was 40 years ago when I started graduate school. I wanted to study human development, really had been working with children. I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher, and then decided that I really wanted to work more individually and in small groups and not be in a big classroom with children. So I had met a social worker along the way, and I thought, well, maybe social work would be a good profession. So I was very fortunate that the University of Michigan has this combined program in social work and social science. So my degrees are both in social work and psychology. And the very first class, I heard somebody say they came to study gerontology, and I'd never heard the word before. So I got interested, and I said, wow, I could study the whole life course, not only focus on children. And before I knew it, within a year, I was taking courses in the gerontology certificate program, doing some work with faculty who were doing research in aging. And I did some volunteer work with an older gentleman, helping him around the house, and also became part of a group, co-leading a group called As Parents Grow Older. And this was back in the late 70s. A lot of this focus on caregiving and in-home care was just really burgeoning and mostly kind of in the medical model. So it was very interesting to get involved as a social worker and a social scientist and to see what dimensions we still needed to learn about the field of gerontology and growing older as opposed to, you know, getting older or old age, you know, happening to people. How can we look at ways to optimize the life course, including the later years? And it's kept me in the field all this time.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Yes, it is.
Because normally, as we are being interested in this topic because we are getting older.
Right.
Very seldom that
But who
somebody.
isn't? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that I wouldn't have been interested so much when I was 40.
No.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So that is very rare that somebody begins so early, and then also to study all this. I heard so. How is it called in medicine? Gerontology?
Geriatrics?
Geriatrics. That there are, I think, one doctor every
For thousands of
thousands
people.
and thousands and thousands of people. That
Yeah.
it's really a neglected area.
Yes.
And when we get older, we need a different way of medicine, I guess. Maybe we talk about that later, but first, you are talking about consciousness and about doing it in a conscious way, getting older in a conscious way. Could you talk a little bit to that?
Yes, well, I consider conscious aging, and there's a term positive aging, which has led to a series of international conferences and so on. And there's other groups of people who study more of the spiritual aspects of aging, which I think conscious aging and positive aging, in a sense, as a broader field encompasses. But for me, conscious aging is about understanding life as it unfolds in a way where one is really awareness, being able to embrace the changes that come with growing older. And we all know there's a lot of stereotypes about growing older, and many of us embody them. But to actually say there are gifts of growing older, one area that I think is quite interesting that I've been following, especially with changes in economics and economies around the world, is that people are working longer. And so there's a lot of interest now in how do people stay engaged with life. And in the course of coming across some of the literature about things, there's a topic called successful aging. In fact, two MacArthur Fellows, Jack Rowe, who was at the University of Michigan, I think he may still be there, who's a sociologist or psychologist, and a physician, Jack Rowe, came up with this idea of successful aging in 3 different dimensions. And I took those 3 dimensions and I twisted them around a little bit and came up with 4 dimensions because consciousness was not in there. They had things about health and social engagement and illness and disability, but they didn't have attitude. So I took their 3 successful aging dimensions and added a 4th one, and they all start with an A. And so I call it acing aging. In fact, I have a little diagram about that if we want to talk about that a little more.
Yeah,
I can share that.
Would you like to share that? That
Yeah.
would be nice to see.
Okay. Let me pull that up. I should have that. I think I need to do a screen share first, correct?
Yeah, and
choose Okay, remind me again how to do that. How to share my screen with you.
on the left side.
On the left side.
Screen share. There we go. Okay. All right. And let's see, I'll say entire screen. And let me go to my model here, which will be on my desktop. Okay. So do you see the 4 aces now?
Yes, we see.
Okay. So I like the idea of, I'm big on alliteration. So I picked 4 A's and I thought acing aging would be one way to do it. So my 4 A's, and this was from a presentation I gave in China exactly a year ago. This weekend marks the 1-year point. So I decided to use the terms the yin and yang of the 4A model, or the 4 aces. So the first one is awareness, being aware of one's propensity towards different kinds of illnesses and disabilities. A lot of people know that heart disease runs in their family, so they might become more aware of how they would eat properly, exercise, and so on. And that comes a little bit later under activity. But sort of the counterpoint of awareness is avoidance. A lot of people think that they don't want to be addressing the possibility that they might have fractures later on, and they're not thinking about their bone health. So awareness trumps avoidance. So we try to promote awareness. And then attitude trumps anger. So oftentimes people get upset or frustrated that things aren't able to function the way they used to. People can't sometimes walk as far, or they may have some challenges remembering things, but a positive attitude and saying, well, these are some changes that may be natural with growing older, or if they're not, it's always good to check those out. But having a positive attitude and really being more conscious about the things that are happening as one grows older are very important. Affiliation, this also comes from the successful aging that we just talked about, and that is that being socially connected. So instead of feeling abandoned, which a lot of older people do, they isolate themselves, becoming more engaged with people as you get older. You may have a partner or spouse who passes on or moves out, or any number of things happen, but it's important to maintain really close relationships with other people. And then the last one, which really ties in a lot to the awareness, is activity, physical activity, mental activity. And without activity, people atrophy. So you can see how it's easy to fall into one end of the continuum or the other, but having this approach to looking at aging from the 4A perspective, I feel can really help people make some plans. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing right now and come back to me.
Oh,
Okay.
that was a nice shorthand.
Wait a minute, I hear an echo. Can you downgrade your volume, please?
Turn it down a bit?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. How's that?
Okay. That seems to be better.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what is on the right side of your presentation? Anger and avoidance and what was it? The other on the right side, I've already forgotten.
Yeah.
But I know that this is the normal attitude of people. They think this is unavoidable. I'm older, and now everything is lost, and I just have to. Apathy was one. No?
Abandonment and avoidance.
Sure.
Yeah. And my spouse is dead now. I'm all alone, and nobody cares for me, and blah 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 blah. A little bit like my mother, she felt really alone, and whenever somebody came, she said hardly good hello. She said hello, Aya, and so it's nice that you come, and that was it. Yeah. So yes. They have no idea how they push other people away, and even if the people are willing to come and see them, but when they don't offer them anything, they have power to attract people and be with people. I think this is the message I wanted to say.
I think that people buy into some stereotypes and they feel shut in, left out, and so it's this sort of inward focus, but not an inward in a reflective way. It's an inward in a shutting out and avoidance. And so that's where I think a model like I've proposed makes people more aware. Oh, so perhaps the things that I'm saying lead people to not want to visit me. I know sometimes it can be challenging, and I went through this when I was younger. My parents would say, call your grandparents, visit your grandparents, and so on. And there was always this notion like, oh, it's just, so boring or whatever. But I think that as people get older, they see themselves as interesting, that you would want to go. I have a friend, in fact, I'm going to pull up a picture that is also in this presentation. This is somebody who is, first I'm going to find it and then I'll turn it on. She's now 95 years old, and people love to go and visit with her because she is a Holocaust survivor from Hungary. She came to the United States when she was about 70, and then started to paint. Her partner, she married her long-lost fiance. Can you see this picture? It says art exhibit at Hollenbeck Palms.
Yes,
So Erica Leon, you see in the center, has been painting now for 25 years. And when they have exhibits at her retirement community, which is where her husband, her long-lost fiance, she married when she was 70, when he was the art instructor there, and then they eventually moved into this retirement community. But the preponderance of, the ratio of paintings by her compared to anyone else is always much higher. And so people love to come and talk to her, hear her stories, but she also takes an interest in other people. So I think that's what is important in growing older and staying vital, is to do things that are really interesting that other people want to hear about. Now, of course, this is not to say that people may not also need companionship because they've had an illness or they've had a loss. I've seen Erica go through losing this beloved husband. She's had various medical problems, but I have to tell you, one day I saw her a couple months ago, and I was going to be going on some travel, so I knew I wouldn't see her for a few weeks. And I always feel like, oh, it might be 3 weeks, and who knows, at that age, will this be the last time I see her? And she said to me, on the whole, I'm pretty happy. And so when I left knowing that, at least at that moment, that she embraces her life. She loves to read, and every time I come, she's like, that book you gave me, I'm done. What's next? She sits outside. These are things that we may think are simple, but they can be very profound. So again, part of this about the conscious aging is being aware, what are the things that keep us vital as we grow older? And what are the things that we do give up or have to let go of? But what can we embrace that will allow us to grow older with dignity, to be able to ask for what we need? See, that's the other thing I don't know how much of this is a Western issue, where people feel they don't want to be, quote unquote, dependent. But let's face it, we're all dependent. We all need other people. And so, Heidi, when you were talking about this concept of people come to visit, and then it's like the litany of complaints. The thing is if people were able to say, can you call me once a week? Or could you bring me something from the deli that I can't go out and do anymore? People ask for what they need. I think it becomes much more interactive.
Great.
Yeah, I have to answer to that, because my mother had this idea of not being a weight to anybody. And so she took herself so much back that, she was a weight to everybody. We couldn't handle this situation.
Yeah, I think a lot, I see it in your reaction to your mother, and also in my reaction to my mother, and how they got older and isolated, and gradually, my mother became very senile. And just withdrew, and less and less interactivity with others. This is part of the reason that we're interested in this subject, because we don't want our final decades to go downhill that way at all.
Right.
I've realized, not long ago, my mother made it to 100. She didn't know anything at age 90, to tell the truth. But I've got close to 30 years left. This is, almost as long as I worked.
Right, exactly. Right.
And so this has got to be a different model. This has got to be something I have to participate in directly. This is something that society has to confront directly, because I'm getting older, they're getting older, I'm living longer, they're living longer, we're all living longer. So we don't have models. We have this old industrial model of, phases of life, and then you go to the old folks' home.
Exactly. And, even just to use that term, old folks home, when I hear people, and I know you're using that as a stereotype, but a lot of people really do think that, well, that's what happens. You get sort of old and decrepit and you can't do anything anymore. So you end up, kind of warehoused, and it does happen. So the question then becomes, And coming back to a point that Heidi made at the beginning about the lack of people trained to work in this field, I have been studying gerontology and I've worked in medical academics over the course of 40 years. It's still really difficult to get people interested in this field. There seem to be people, when they love it, they love it. And that's what I love about the field. The people who have a passion for it are wonderful people because they really care about the people they're working with. They love to engage with each other. You know, this is not like geriatrics as a medical practice is not a field where you just have a solo practitioner. People need to make referrals. They may have nurses, social workers, physical therapists, occupational. There's a real sort of team orientation. So actually, it's a very exciting field and one that I've reinvented myself so many times. One of my latest interests is around entrepreneurship and aging, and there's quite a bit of interest in this topic globally, just so, you know, if that's something that we want to talk about. The fastest rate of increase in entrepreneurs is among people in their 50s. So everybody thinks you have to be young and you know, kind of, what would you call it? Sort of that ideas come more quickly to younger people, but in fact, people who are older who've had some life experience, sometimes they have some resources that younger people don't have. And they often have a passion to do things that they've wanted to do, but in their regular, you know, day jobs that they couldn't do. So there's this whole concept of the encore career and a lot of interest in that, especially in the United States, but also globally.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is there are two, let's say two problems, if you want to call that problem. One is to find people who want to work with older people and help them. Mm-hmm. And the other problem is how to inspire older people to give up the old mindset of loss and decrepitude. Yeah, and instead of embracing what is possible in older age. Mm-hmm. Because I read about studies, many people, the older they get, the happier they are.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, as a matter of fact, it's called the U-shaped curve. Mm-hmm. And so, the happiest people are the very young and you know, the older adults. So oftentimes we have the stereotype that people get depressed, like just the, you know, that whole visual that you had about withdrawal and so on. That's really not a normal part of aging. Now, people may have fewer activities, they may be less physically involved and so on. But in terms of, you know, people still have a desire to connect with other people. And I think that when we recognize that these stereotypes, it's like, are people taking on these stereotypes and they think, well, I can't do this anymore, or I don't have any, you know, creative energy. But in fact, actually a lot of folk art, there's a wonderful researcher and geriatric psychiatrist who has passed away a few years ago, but his name is Cohen, G-E-N-E. C-O-H-E-N, and he wrote a book called The Mature Mind, and he talks about, in that book and another book he wrote called The Creative Age, that if you go to museums and look at like quilting and different kinds of more, you know, in the line of folk art, a lot of times these are older people, that there's actual brain changes, the right and the left parts of the brain, the communication in the corpus callosum, which is the part of the brain that connects the right and left hemispheres, there's actually increased activity there. So if people began to realize, oh, as I get older, first of all, you have more freedom. I don't know about, you know, your point of view, but I find that, or your experience, I should say, but as I get older and I'm in my 60s now, I care less about what other people think and say. So a lot of times that shows up in the things that I wear. I call myself Colorful Connie from California. And so to me, I can wear things that maybe 10 or 20 years ago might not look as quote unquote professional, but it doesn't matter because this is my way of engaging in creative expression. So I think if people realize they have that freedom and that the judgments of other people are less important, then they can take more risks and get their ideas out there.
Yeah, and what
Well,
I think
it's so good that we don't have to look professional anymore.
that's true. And I wanted to say, the more, if you have done the development work,
Yes.
the more you become yourself, and the less you need to have these attributes, like, you know, colors everywhere and dresses which are like this, you know, like perfect, and you don't need it anymore, because, you know, you're just yourself, and you don't care if somebody doesn't like you, because there will be somebody who likes you. So we don't have to be liked anymore by everybody. We are not anymore in this stress to make it right. And this was part of my life, you know. So yes. I'm really happy that I cannot lose anything anymore.
Right.
That's in some way.
Yes.
Well, I think that stress midlife is pretty common to most people. They're in the middle of careers. They're paying for houses and big mortgages and cars and families and kids and terrible expenses and being in many directions. It's a very difficult time, and you don't want to lose your job. You know, you make those are huge sacrifices.
Yes,
huge sacrifices.
So my jumps. If people had a minimum income and wouldn't need to fear to lose their jobs, they could do what they liked much before. And so it would be a culture of expressing yourself with what you want to do. So it wouldn't be after a requirement that you stay there and say, what do I do now? And then it's difficult to allow yourself to go back to explore your passions, your desires, everything. It seems it's not allowed. When you're old, you have to be grandma, and that's it.
Well, my mother
never will be a grandparent. So, you know,
right.
I think this whole idea of identity, like, who do we see ourselves, the roles. I want to talk a little bit, and this kind of comes back to this bigger topic of conscious aging. So I've been very privileged to be able to meet as well as interview for both a radio show I do in Los Angeles called Experience Talks, but also for one of the Positve Aging Conferences. Ram Dass, who's, most people know the expression, be here now. And then he wrote a book after he had a stroke called Still Here. And more recently, books Be Love Now and Polishing the Mirror. And I saw him earlier this year in May. He does retreats twice a year in Maui. He doesn't travel anymore because of his stroke. But people come from all over the world to see him. And he talks about this concept that we are not our roles. So, you know, if you think I'm a grandparent, I'm a parent, I'm a retiree or whatever, or I'm a patient. And this is a great example because he's had some medical problems even since his stroke. And he said, you know, when you go into the hospital, he says it's the body shop because they're there to, you know, tinker with your, whatever is wrong with your body. He said, but really we're all there. We're all souls together. It's not that I'm the patient, you're the doctor, the nurse or whatever. We're souls. We're here doing what needs to be done, and we're connected on a soul level. And if you embrace a concept like this, then that means, you know, the person on the street who's homeless is not that person. This person is the same, you know, shares the same kind of soul connection as anyone else, and even a dictator or a tyrant. So we all have a connection. We're all here for a purpose. And so when I started reading about these concepts that Ram Dass promoted, it really changed my way of thinking because I've been, you know, teaching social workers and, you know, this is our role and what we do as a particular profession. But when it comes down to the personal and interpersonal engagement, it has a very different feel. And some of the things that I've learned as a, you know, as a professional in this field, especially in terms of social work or geriatric medicine and so on, there might be things that we're taught and this is the best way to do things or whatever, but it's really turning around a lot for me. Even things like end of life. So as you probably know, I'm not sure in Europe how much the discussions are going on, but certainly I listen to the Canadian broadcasting sometimes, and in the United States, California being one of the most recent states to have the ability for people to engage in assisted suicide. So there's a lot of discussion about end of life and so on. And I used to be a big proponent because personally, I don't want to be, hooked up to machines and tubes and so on and so forth, but that's my choice. But there are older people who say, I want to have it all, because if I have a heart attack, you could say, CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is a very invasive procedure. They pound your chest and put electrodes and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, if somebody decides that if there's a chance that they could still live, they want to have it, it's not really my place to try to convince them otherwise. And then I started thinking, well, what if the person in the hospital said, yeah, I don't want anything? Then they put a sign over your bed. It says DNR, do not resuscitate. And I wonder if that would make a difference in how they're treated. If somebody says, oh, that's the DNR, so I don't want to go near that person. And, what if they have a heart attack and I just have to watch them die or something? So, we have to think through some of these questions, that we may have an idea that there's certain solutions or points of view. But the reality is to respect the dignity of individual choice. Yeah. We have to think about it.
Now, there is in Europe, at least in Germany, but now also in Italy, you can fill, no, I don't talk about that. You can fill out how you want to be treated if you cannot speak anymore, if you cannot take care for anymore. And I have heard that although you have it in Italy, they won't respect it. They won't bring you to the hospital.
Right.
Because they fear about their reputation, about their professional blah, blah. And they don't want to respect people's wishes, and I don't think this is right. I wouldn't arrive to the point with the assisted suicide, because I witnessed it with a friend of mine. Her father did that, and he only feared that he would lose his memory and things. He was perfectly functional, but he had this retirement thing. Before he was a big professor of something, and then he had nothing to do anymore, sort of, and he didn't get the curve to use his knowledge for good in the world. And so, but with this decision, how much pain he inflicted on his family, on the children and grandchildren, I thought it was really not good. Maybe for him, but not what he did for his surroundings. So these things need to be seen not only as a personal choice, but also to consider who is around you, is with you, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, there's so many factors here, and we rub up against politics, we rub up against professional reputations. As a teacher I know, you may have heard of Ken Wilber, who reminds us that progress proceeds funeral by funeral. And so there's people remain human on all sides of this, all around. All kinds of possibilities are there. And I even came to embrace my mother's Alzheimer's eventually, because she had begun as a daughter, became a husband and a mother, a wife. Oh yeah, it was a wife. Yes, it was. And my father died rather young, and she had, decades of nothing except trying to amuse herself some ways,
No, and before she was dutiful. She did her duty and never spoke up. You told me that she never spoke up. No. And the dementia allowed her to say,
"Oh, the hell!"
Right. Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, it served her, It's like the dementia was the natural end of this life of repression and duty and servitude. That she never could escape. Well,
that's a lot of awareness on your part to be able to see it, in that way, and to allow, because we don't know. I mean, I have a whole thing around Alzheimer's, because that's also runs in my family, dementia, and we don't really know what causes it. Some of the causes we know, but not Alzheimer's. There's no good treatments. There's no real solid evidence how to prevent it, and so on. And then even just to diagnose it, still in today's medical arena, it's largely on autopsy. Well, at that point, it's pretty much nothing you can do about it. But if we say, all right, here's this condition, and people have this, how can we enable them to still have meaning and to still have positive experiences, and to accept the fact that sometimes the behaviors are not a reflection of who that person once was.
Yeah, and if you see it more on the psychological side, it can be a way to go out of life, of the life they had, they couldn't change while they maybe could.
Well, they were in control.
Yeah, other
life.
people die to escape a certain situation. I think, I'm convinced, my father, he died with 59, and he had cancer. And he sort of wanted to escape the family situation because, my mother was what she was. And it was, in these times, you couldn't just separate. So you had to go up to the end, or the separation was death. It was also for women. They got the tuberculosis in previous years, and it's classical, or the operas, they talk about these women who die. And this was a way to get out of the life, which obviously, mainly for society reasons, you couldn't change. And I think this is also the case with your mother. And when we could look at these illnesses in this way, what do they serve? Why does the person choose to have this illness? And can it be reversible? Maybe not necessarily on the physical way, but in the internal and the physical comes with it. There are so many, let's say, healers who have the capacity to help. We have a friend of us, Dr. Vivian Carlson, and she does that work with people who are ready to see it. Who is not ready to see it, who wants to stay in victimization. There is not much choice, and I think we have also to grant people their way of doing it. So my sister always tried to convince my mother what she had to do, and she, and then as soon as my sister disappeared, she didn't do it. Wow. So she did accept that her way is a different way. Her path is different. And I think we have to allow everybody the choice, even if we don't like it. It would be better if it was a conscious choice. We are talking about conscious aging. Correct. But I think we are now the first ones who are talking about that. Right. The first ones who have the chance to get older in a different way.
Great privilege and a responsibility, both. Yeah.
So what I'd like to ask you, how can we respect the will of other people, even not to do anything, but still sort of help them to go into a different attitude?
So sounds like maybe that's your work.
Yes. So I think what you're asking is, given how we approach growing older, whether it's like a Western attitude or a worldwide attitude or whatever. So, people may behave in a certain way and it may not be pleasant or whatever, but that's in a sense their own decision. But at the same time, how can we broaden the consciousness around aging so that people might be able to reflect on it differently? I believe that one area that's important that we haven't touched on yet is the intergenerational nature of life, because what I see happening, and one reason I don't want to live in a retirement community, is I thrive on interaction. I have 2 millennial daughters. I love to learn about things that I wouldn't otherwise know about because I'm not around a lot of younger people. I used to be when I was teaching full-time in a classroom, but now a lot of my work is online, virtual, and so on. So I can go a whole day and not be around very many people at all. And so think about like older people who in their 60s and 70s, they move into a retirement community or age 55 active community or something, and then they're hardly around, maybe their own grandchildren or something like that, if they even have them. So what happens is people become very sort of isolated and only focused on the things that people in their own age group are doing, and they lose track. And it's no wonder younger people say, oh, older people can be boring, because even things like technology, older people will embrace technology if they have somebody to help them use it. And I think my friend Erica, who we just were talking about earlier, is a perfect example. I gave her an old computer when my younger daughter moved out to go to college, and then she was able to use Skype. She still has family in Hungary, and she Skypes every day. It's been now almost 10 years. You can teach an old person, I don't want to use that word, dog, new tricks. And, at the same time, she's got arthritis. It's a little hard to navigate, and things can happen on computers. But I maintain that if somebody came in a couple of hours twice a week for her, for other people who might, be willing to do more with computers, at least they would stay a little more engaged in what's going on in the world.
Absolutely.
So,
And I've seen some interesting intergenerational experiments too, where college students will be given a place to stay in return for helping
right.
in the facility,
Mhm.
and so they get this continual interaction with people not their own age.
Right.
And these are wonderful ideas, I think, because oh gosh, I've moved gladly as soon as I could retire to a retirement community in Florida. I stayed for 5 years.
Wow.
And fortunately, I had a way out because it was so stultifying.
Yes. Right.
It was just nothing going on. There was all these death and illness and hospitalization notices in the in the community center, and very little in the way of recreation. People doing things, such quietness. They wouldn't allow pets, and these were individual buildings, not a apartment block or anything.
Wow.
So.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
But this is the idea, and we are talking also about ageism. This is the idea that in a certain age, you have to behave in a certain way. You have to like and to want certain things. And if you don't, I know. So it's a mindset thing, which is not only by younger people, but also by many of our generation and the older generation for sure. Yep. So I think what I would point to is that we need to do consciousness training. I mean,
yes, exactly.
It's not so much the actions in themselves, what is to do, but to change the mindset.
Yes. Well, I was part of a luncheon group just a few weeks ago at the Positve Aging Conference, and the head of a major organization in the United States that does a lot of great work with older adults, very oriented towards like the service delivery system, which is largely funded through government sources and so on. But positive aging is a little bit of a twist, and it's not one of the kind of standard gerontology, geriatrics approaches, but they wanted to have some of us who were thought leaders there to talk about how to integrate into the traditional service delivery system more of these innovations and ideas. So we'll see what comes from our lunchtime discussion, but they're doing these types of focus groups. Another thing that happened that was really exciting was they had something called a world cafe. Have you heard of this concept of a world cafe? Because they did those in Europe a few years ago when it was the European Union Year of the Older Adult. So this was specifically designed to engage intergenerational dialogue, and we had to try to find enough younger people, meaning like under the age of 40, to sort of balance out, since positive aging tends to draw people more, in their mid to later life. But, we were able to get enough people, and we would sit at tables and have dialogue, and then people would get up and move around. So the results from that will be, coming out again soon. But it was very interesting to actually sit down and have a dedicated dialogue to looking at what are some of the questions and issues that either cut across generations or that, butt up one generation against the other. Because a lot of media tends to promote these stereotypes that, younger people think Social Security won't be there for them when they get older, and, why are they working so hard and so on. I'm not saying that there aren't people who believe that, but we have to look at what role media plays in this as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I noticed that in the UK, that young people were blaming old people for cutting off their future, not allowing them to interact with the rest of Europe.
By Brexit.
Brexit, yes.
And there was this generational lines that
Right.
I think largely fictitious, but easy to exploit politically.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and there are politics here, folks. Yes, there are.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I noticed I did the presentation in the conference, the Interage-European Conference in Hungary. There were, I think, half of the people in our room were under 40.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was quite an interest. And one person even spoke up, a young woman, and she said she likes to be with older people because we can teach them sort of wisdom. And, actually, when I think back, I wouldn't be again 20. I wouldn't like to be again 30 and not even 40. And, not even 50.
Yeah.
So I really can understand, because we have sort of a global grandfather role. So many people grow up not even seeing their parents, but even less wise people around them. Maybe some grandfather, but they were in awe,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't get the opening which they might get from people who are older, who are not so busy doing, but who are a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more happy. Right. And I think we have this role, we are over 60s, to bring that to younger people. So the question is, how do we reach them? And, how are we attractive enough so that younger people come to us without us saying, you should listen to us because we are wise.
We're old wise. We know everything. We know so much more about being young than you know about being old.
Well, and research shows that wisdom is not inevitable as you get older. I mean, it's something that develops, and younger people can sometimes be wiser than older people. So at the same time, that notion of life experience and being able to respect and honor and learn from each other. I think that that's going to be key. And I believe also that when people have more exposure across generations, then they can work together more easily. So, I'm hoping, so at the Positve Aging Conference, which was in Washington, D.C. last month, August 2016, with having the younger people part of the worldcafe, because not all of them stayed at the conference, but there's a student that he and his wife were there, and they're both in their late 20s. And when he left at the end, he said to me, I really feel so comfortable here. I really love being around these people, because again, a little more progressive, very, active, vital older people who are coming and, sharing their ideas and so on. And so I think we need to find ways for younger people to be more engaged with the things that older people are doing. And also they have their own, talents and abilities. In the technology area, that's where there's a lot of interaction across generations. And, I think in the arts, there's so many possibilities, but that's not usually where governments are looking. They're looking at like healthcare dollars or, helping people stay at home, which I think is good. But then sometimes being at home is pretty isolating. So we need some new models.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and I think actually coming back to the young people interacting with older people, I think it's up to us, really up to us to find a way to engage with them, to go away from the superiority, oh, I know it, everything better. Because when you understand the stages of development, you know perfectly where they are in, and you don't have to fight against what they are doing only because you know better. Yes, you know better, but you don't have to impose it on them. You will see that it's a stage which you have been in too, and then you go through and you develop, and they will too. So I think this is most the generational conflict, because the older people think they know everything better.
And this is an aspect of ageism that works in both directions. Absolutely. You know.
You're right.
Yeah. I don't know. We know a couple young people.
Oh yeah, I normally, our friends are normally younger.
Well, they are younger than us, that's true. I'm talking about really young people in their 20s and so forth.
Yeah.
Just a couple. Yeah.
Just some. But you know, we are sort of at the end of our conversation, and I would like to ask everybody of us, we have on our heart, which we want to share. Oh, this is this side, excuse me. Oh.
You just noticed that. Huh?
To share, which we really want to bring out, you know, not stop without having said that. And I first ask you and leave the last bit to
Well, I might
Connie.
just pick up on that ageism business because I have been really inspired by a couple writers, popular people who are just really feisty and banging away on the typewriter and getting up there and talking about that issue, you know, and seeing it everywhere and pointing out where it is in me as well, how much I internalized all of this nonsense. That was just the way, that was just the world I was in and so forth. So I really am excited about it. Borders on politics. Sometimes you have to be not so nice with the things people say to you. You know, like, you look pretty for your age. Well, thank you, and so do you.
Yes, I mean, if we resonate with those comments, it does reinforce the stereotype.
It does.
You know, you shouldn't be looking the way, you know, that at that age you really should be looking older than you really do. So
and you're still riding your bicycle.
We should find some paradox responses to that, so that they get to know, oh.
And you're still wondering about these things? Well, anyway, that's my ending comments.
My ending comments is that I really like and love this conversation, and we will have more of it. We will have, I think, about 8 to 10 speakers, and get them also together in a panel discussion. We plan that, and this would be very nice. What we need to find is somebody who talks about older people and sexuality. I don't think we have.
Well, I can talk about that.
Okay.
well, that sounds very exciting.
Yeah, because we listened to an audio program, how do you say, teleconferences. I think it was 12 speakers or even more, but nobody touched the topics.
It never came up. Yeah.
So it's not, all the people don't have sex. No. This is one of the taboo topics, and I think we have to address them too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm looking really forward, and I thank you to have done the introduction to that, and we will use this conversation with you to invite people to join in and to give us their take.
Well, I'm so honored that you invited me to be a part of your series, and I love the Facebook post, and we now have this great relationship. So even though it's virtual right now, but this helps us stay engaged and active and explore these ideas and you know, kind of plow through some stereotypes. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for you to come. And you know, I think we can do these things only together. The lonely wolves today, we cannot do that. So
No.
we need to find the possibility to work together. And we are beginning this. Thank you.
Yep.
And bye-bye, everybody who is watching now or later. Please leave your comments and contact us.
Yep.
We have the live stream on thewisdomfactory.net. And we have also, we are beginning to have a website which is called Aging, .com, and where we will post all relevant step by step, all relevant topics, contributions, articles, videos, and everything. And you are invited to join us. Give us your material, your ideas, whatever you find, and you find it interesting. Please share it with us. Okay.
And don't forget our Facebook.
Oh, Facebook. Yeah, join the Facebook group.
Masterminding Integral Aging.
Masterminding
Okay.
Integral Aging. Excellent.
Yeah, and it's quite lively.
Yeah.
I know that. Okay, thank you. See
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.